For, thank you. Stand for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This is being live streamed. First one ever, I think, it's been live streamed as far
Work
as that goes.
session, yes.
Work session.
As officially new state law, July 1, 2025, so this is our first attempt. We welcome all those folks out in virtual land.
Right, and if we forget to turn on our mics, we do apologize now in advance. Dr. Ather, I'll let you take on the first work session
Absolutely.
part.
So, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Tonight, we have 4 agenda items. Number 1, we're going to start off with, everyone I think is aware, we did an engagement survey earlier this spring, actually at the end of the school year, in transition of leadership, to get some feedback to create some action plans in the transition. So tonight, we have with us from Advisa, our team we're partnering with, two great leadership consultants who are going to lead us through an insight session. I'm going to let Krista and Mandy introduce themselves, and then we'll just go. And then the board's free to ask questions. They'll probably, I think we can ask as we go, but however we want to do it. So we'll introduce our welcome the Advisa team. Yep.
All right, hi team. Can everybody hear me? Out in virtual land and right here in the room. Feels good to hear my own voice. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having us here tonight. I'm Mandy Haskett. I'm a leadership consultant at Advisa. And I'll just introduce you to make this go really fast. This is Krista Warren. She's an industrial and organizational psychologist on our team and has deep expertise in people data. So tonight, the kind of data that we're talking about is specifically is engagement data, employee engagement data. So we at Advisa have been working with Westfield Washington Schools now for several years, actually, bringing several different types of things to the group. So we help you with your predictive index program for folks who are familiar with PI, and of course several of your leaders have come through our development journeys, which is great. Advisa is a leader development firm. We're headquartered right down the road in Carmel, and our whole aim is to help create effective leaders, teams, and cultures. So tonight we're really just zoomed in on one element of our work with you, which is this engagement survey, which John's already talked about. So I'm going to take us through here. I've already introduced ourselves. Here are 2 giant photos of our heads in case you can't see them right here in the room. So here's what we're up to. We've got an hour together, and that we've got a lot to get to. So our hope is that we're sharing with you for about 40 minutes, and that we're leaving 20 minutes at the end at a minimum for your questions and for some discussion. So if you've got a burning question, of course, please let us know. Otherwise, jot it down, and we'll be sure to leave some space at the end for your questions. So I'm going to set some context for us and talk about a strategic backdrop. What is engagement? Why do we measure this thing again? And what's it really predicting and correlating to? I'll also talk a little bit about our goals, our timeline, bring the past to the present, that sort of thing. From there, I'll hand it over to Krista. Krista's going to share the data. Tonight, we're really just doing an executive summary. There, as you know, there are a lot of people employed in Westfield Washington Schools, so there are a lot of different pieces of data. And she's going to give you an overview of what we found in those insights. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we'll do questions, and we'll talk a little bit about what the next steps are, too. We've got a couple more steps here in the process. So before I dive any further, any questions about just where we're headed over the course of the next hour? Doing my best teacher scan here. No questions. I got some thumbs up.
Well, my name is Mike Steele. One of the questions I got is how is this going to be broken down? I guess, are we just looking at a big picture? Are we looking at individual schools? or departments, or how's that gonna work?
Yeah, great question. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah. So we will start off pretty high level. We'll start with an executive summary, which is the headlines of anything that you take away from this data. So that'll be a combination of qualitative data and quantitative data. We'll then dive deeper. So we'll go into the layers of the demographics that we'll take a look at. And so tonight that will be department, role type, and tenure. And then we'll take a look at comment themes before we wrap up. So we'll have some graphs, and I'm going to set some context of what the data is telling us so you have a bit more additional information going into those numbers. Is that a helpful response? Okay.
Okay, perfect. So let's get into a little bit of context together here. So quick timeline, I think it's helpful to just remember how we got here today and bring the past to the present, as I mentioned. So we got this project started in the spring. We kicked it off in March and started our communication efforts to the team members, letting everybody know what to expect. I've got folks behind me too, so I'm gonna turn once in a while. Hello. What engagement was, what this survey was aiming to do, of course, helping them understand that all of their responses would be anonymous and confidential, which of course they've been. We launched the survey in April 29th, before school let out. That survey was open for 2 weeks. We did our data collection and our deep dive analysis at Advisa, and then came back together for a series of insight sessions. So most of the data that you're seeing tonight has been shared already with the AST June 5th. So we've already started circulating some of these insights. And then, of course, we're here with you today on the 22nd. And then on Thursday, this is really where our journey in this project or process will start to come to a close, but where your work really begins, or at least the work of your leaders begins, is Thursday will be helping facilitate a workshop at the Leadership Summit to help convert this data into action, right? That's the whole aim for us. Is data is meaningless without insight and certainly without action. There's that great old Mark Twain quote, data is like garbage. You better have a plan for what you're going to do with it before you start collecting it. So in our world, the whole aim of data is it's a catalyst for individual and organizational change. And we know that this is going to help put folks on a more strategic path to making better decisions with their limited energy and resources. So Thursday is the day where we really start converting this data into some action. I want to share some of the goals that we set out to achieve. So at the very beginning of this process, when we got together in the spring, we said, well, why would we measure engagement? What's the point of this? What might we be hoping to do? And we all really locked arms around three things. One, of course, would be to establish a baseline. Historically, Westfield Washington Schools just hasn't had a group of people data at this level. That helps us understand the emotional and cognitive commitment of your people on a regular cadence. The second is obviously to understand how our teachers and staff feel and think about their jobs. In other words, let's not guess. Let's make this objective. That's important, right? I mean, we are all often left up to our subjective interpretations. We're loaded with bias. That's normal. But it's really important that every year, irrespective of the tool that you choose to use, you're snapping a consistent chalk line and taking a picture of your people's emotional commitment to their work, their organization, and its objectives. So we wanted to make sure that we were using some data and that we were using a tool that was validated, that there was a data set that actually was measuring what it said it measured. So this is all science. This is all rooted in deep research. The tools that we use are from 15.5, their Engage instrument. So that's a scientifically valid instrument that does measure what it says it measures, which is engagement, based on those correlating predictors. And Krista will get into exactly what those are when she starts to share the data. So these are the things that were really important to us as we set out on this path. And I want to just pause and make sure that we're also aligning before we get into the data on what engagement even is. I guess just quick show of hands in the room. How many of you are familiar or deeply familiar even with engagement surveys or this kind of data? Anybody? Awesome. Hello. Hi. Thank you. We have one person. That's great. So engagement, the study of engagement has been around in a pretty robust fashion, I would say, since the 60s, as it relates to just the study of industrial and organizational psychology. But what it is really is engagement is the emotional commitment that an individual feels to their organization and its objectives. So I'll say it one more time, emotional commitment. That seems soft. Like, why might we measure that? What we know is that when individuals are emotionally committed to their work and their objectives, a lot of things start to happen. And primarily they're related to discretionary effort. So we know that high engagement individuals focus on performing high quality work. We know they put a lot of additional discretionary effort into their work and share their energy with others. And interestingly, they find a lot of meaning. They tend to derive meaning and purpose in the work that they do. So the reason that we look to engagement scores organizationally is because they are still the best predictor that we have for productivity. So as leaders move to try and rekindle productivity amongst their teams and think about what might get people going, we have to include the data point of emotional commitment. Of course, it's not binary. There are so many other factors that go into this element, but it's important that we include it as we make this transition into having a new superintendent and to moving into a new sort of strategic aim. It's important that we have data like this to help us inform where we put our energy and our time. So I'll share one last model here that before Krista gets into the data. I mentioned earlier that we believe data is a catalyst for change. We call this the strategic relationship chain, and I think it's a nice visual for helping us understand where engagement fits in the puzzle as we think about strategic planning broadly. So as you can see on that chain, way to the right are our results, the things that we hope to achieve. Those are our achievement scores, right? Our behavioral standards, our attendance, all the things that we hope to achieve as a school district. And those things are happening as a result of parent, teacher, student satisfaction, for lack of a better word, right? The energy that comes into that classroom, the ability for a child to learn, that happens as a result of oftentimes a group of employees, teachers being engaged. So we know that teacher engagement, there are lots of studies, and I won't cite them tonight in our little bit of time that we have together, that correlate, reading scores with high engagement workplaces, for example. So go look those up because they're great. We know that organizational culture is, of course, the tipping point, the trigger that creates the environment that fosters high employee engagement, high teacher-employee engagement in particular. So this chain is often in strategic planning worked right to left. We think about, hey, what are we trying to achieve? And then we try and get about the business of figuring out the technical ways we'll do it. And we are working this chain left to right tonight. So where we are is that light blue bubble. We're thinking about, hey, what is the employee engagement makeup today? Remember, we took this picture in April. So this is a lag measure. This picture was taken under a different superintendent even. So we're looking a little bit at the past, but the hope would be that you're snapping this chalk line every year with some tool of your choice that's valid so that you can get these insights. So when we think about moving this chain left to right, and I mentioned our time with the principals and the groups, the teams on Thursday, the principals specifically will be sharing their school data with their teams. And then from there, they will collaborate on Thursday to determine 1 to 2 action items for the school year. We will coach them through this. This is part of our workshop on Thursday, but the law of diminishing returns applies here. We want to make sure they're just choosing 1 to 2 things that are achievable. And what's important is that these not only yield high impact on their engagement scores, but they also align to support the school's strategic aims. So data like this is strategic because it helps us move from what's wrong to what matters most. And it has to matter to the school for it to be an initiative that they grab onto on Thursday. So with that context, I will scoot you out of the way and let you talk a little bit about the data.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. Okay, so like I mentioned, we're gonna dive into the data here. We're gonna start pretty high level with what we call our executive summary. So we're gonna give you some headlines here, and then I'll walk you through setting some context of what the data's measuring, how it's measuring it. I promise not to try and bore you with that too deeply. And then we'll get into some of the data cuts themselves. So to start off at a very high level, there are things that we want to celebrate as we look at this data. There's always wins and there's always areas of opportunity. So we have a couple summaries here, and one of the goals, as Mandy touched on, was to have a baseline of engagement. And so our very first engagement baseline is moderately engaged, which is a great place to be. So you are almost smack dab in the middle as you think about engagement ranges, and that's our starting point. So really we can only maintain or go up from here. So that's our first win off the bat. As we think about some of the expression from employees, there is a clear passion for their work, for the community, for working with students. And that's, of course, what you want to see when working in this industry. So it's very important, but it comes out in everything that they share. And so this starts our baseline foundation. If we think about that organizational culture piece, this is what's building all of this that we currently have. I also want to call out a couple notable statistics from specific statements. 98% of employees either chose agree or strongly agree that the work that they do is meaningful to them. That is really impressive, and it's hard to find. You can't inherently create that for people. That's something that's internal, part of their environment, so already off to a great start. Research has shown that people tend to seek out meaningful work as we think about our purpose in life. This is important to Gen Z, it's important to older folks, all the generations. We all want to have a sense of meaning. So that's clearly here and present. The second stat is that 91% of employees agree or strongly agree that they have role clarity. You would be surprised how oftentimes people don't, what am I doing here? What's my job? People don't have to spend mental energy thinking about those types of things. So that's another win. And then also there were components of open-ended comments. And more than 230 employees wrote more than 200 words in the comment section. And why that is notable is because you want to hear what people have to say. You should be concerned when people stop sharing their feedback. So people are passionate, they want to share their thoughts, their feelings, and so that's another win. As we shift over to the areas of opportunity, there are some mentions of a disconnect just between administration and staff, whether that's unclear communication, limited visibility, and perhaps a sense that employee voices are not heard or understood. So as we think about this engagement survey, capturing people's voices, this is the first step in that. So we want to honor that. We want to thank them for their participation, say we heard you, and here's what we plan to do. As we talk about PLCs, which my understanding is that's professional learning communities, did I get that right, John? Okay, great. That came up a lot. So this is something people are familiar with, and there were mixed perceptions. So some people are like, this is fabulous, we're doing really great work. And it seems to maybe be just the experience they have with their group, or just general sense of, this isn't as effective as we were thinking, we feel a bit micromanaged, draining on my prep time. So just something to get a pulse on and dive deeper into, get an overall sense. The next one is just cleanliness and sanitation. There was a significant point of contention, particularly at MTES, so Monon Trail, roughly 39% of respondents who left comments just citing that perhaps there were unacceptable conditions in their eyes, just something to raise a flag and bring attention to. One of the data slices that we're going to take a look at are the role types. And so those are broken down. And as we look at the areas of, hey, we want to dial in even more and pour into these roles, that would be the generalists 2, 6, 4, and 3. They had the lowest overall engagement. And particularly generalists 2 were considered disengaged. So key area to thinking about as we take action specifically at the school level. That's a high-level summary of some of our findings here. From here, I'm going to shift into talking about the tool that captured the engagement survey itself, which is 15.5. And the survey itself was previously Amplify, and that was actually a local organization, if some may be familiar, over in Fisher. So that was acquired by 15Five, and that's a platform we utilized. What you see there on the left is the definition that 15Five uses of engagement. I won't bore you by reading it to you, but it's pretty standard across the board, being that emotional commitment and passion that people have in the work that they do. There are then 7 very specific statements that capture the overall engagement score. And they fall into 3 categories of focus, force, and feeling. And so these statements are represented on the survey itself. It's not all of the statements, but these ones directly tie to capturing that overall engagement score. They're then presented with a Likert scale. So from strongly disagree to strongly agree, that's used to then calculate the overall engagement score. So if you take a look at some of those statements, right, it's about focus at work giving them a sense of pride, they find meaning and purpose in the work that they do, a sense of happiness when they work, they like going to work, loving the feeling of working, and finding it very easy to stay focused on the things that they need to accomplish. So I think it's important to call out that these are the ones that are capturing that overall engagement score. However, there are more than one question on the survey itself, so we'll dive into that more. But once that score is calculated, it is then placed into a percentile or an overall engagement level. You're going to continue to see this legend there represented in the graphs we'll dive into further, but it's going to range from disengaged, somewhat engaged, moderately engaged, highly engaged, and extremely engaged. As we get into the demographics, it will break down into the representation of particular percentages. So the overall engagement percentile is represented there. We've already talked about it's moderately engaged. So again, middle of the baseline, most folks are pretty engaged at work. So setting the context there. And then as we think about the other components of the work experience, it's not just your engagement, but it's your work experience, your interaction with leadership. How do you feel about your manager? How do you feel about the people you work with day in and day out? So each of these icons represents one of the 17 drivers that are also captured in the survey. So there are particular statements that also ask and inquire about that experience. We're going to then look at some drivers because these drivers can either increase the overall engagement, so you could think of them as levers that's either going to push it up, or in the opposite motion, it might pull down that overall engagement. This helps you give a targeted view of where we might need to pour in more, or where we want to celebrate, hey, we're doing really great here. So that's a bit of a context setting here for the tool itself. We'll then move into some of the data components. So we've already touched on the overall moderately engaged, which is 74.56. You're seeing that right there in the middle. And you can see it's basically in the midway point of that range. We had an overall 71% response rate, which was 843 people completed the survey out of the 1,191 invited. And this is huge as well, especially for an organization of this size. Typical industry standard, you want at least 65%. So we clearly exceeded that, so we can be confident that this data represents 71% of the population here within the district. All the way to the right, a couple things you're seeing here. The system itself will actually determine, based on a calculation on the back end, and it's using a large language model based on 600,000 responses to determine what statements have more impact on engagement. Yeah, go ahead.
So Krista,
Yeah.
it's hard for us to see, so I am
Oh.
going to invite the board, if they want to sit out there. to
Oh,
look at the
sure.
screen,
Yes, please.
They can do that.
Okay.
Typically, that's what we do in a work session, but with our new live stream, this is, and we get a lot of presentations and work sessions, typically we're
Yeah.
around that screen. So if
Got it.
anyone's struggling to see, just hop on out there and look at the screen as Krista talks. I mean, we can pause to do that.
Absolutely.
because-
Yeah, go ahead. Feel free to relocate.
Yeah.
And
because-
I can do my job of narrating more of what I'm seeing on there in case folks don't want to move, but you still want to have an idea of what you're seeing there.
And again, this is our first time, so we're trying to get it right. Like next time, we might move things
Sure.
around, so.
We're happy to be the guinea pigs here. Okay. Oh, I get it. Yes. If only you knew my contact prescription, but, so there all the way to the right, I mentioned there's a calculation going on in the background. And so it's gonna capture, hey, here are 2 areas that you can focus on improving, and here's 2 areas to celebrate. And because there is an algorithm determining these areas, I do wanna give the caveat that that might not be the area that the district or the individual schools need to work on. As Mandy mentioned, it's important to focus on what matters, not necessarily what's wrong, especially based on an algorithm. But based on that algorithm, it's going to predict if you pour into these areas of improvement, you're likely going to statistically increase that overall engagement. So I just want to set that context for you all. So as we think about the areas to improve, the first was goal support. Westfield Washington Schools helps to limit the number of distractions that keep me from achieving my goals. That's an area of potential opportunity. The second one is capacity. I am confident in my ability to think clearly at work. That's the second one. Now on the flip side, the areas we want to celebrate and maintain both have to do with meaning, which again we mentioned is really important in the lane of work. So the first one is the work I do on this job is very important to me. We've already talked about really high percentage of people agree with that. And the second is my job activities are personally meaningful to me. And so that's exactly what we want to see, especially as we're impacting the youth within the district. So that's our high-level summary here. We're going to cover 2 more data components before we dive deeper into those demographics. And the first one is taking a look at the top 5 positive drivers. So again, we mentioned those 17 drivers that can either push up or pull up engagement. And what we're capturing here are the top 5 that actually had a positive impact on that overall engagement. And so within this graph, what you're seeing here is the name of the driver, so that first one being meaning. The work I do on this job is very important to me. You'll have the statement there. And then what you're seeing in that teal circle is the predictive impact. So it's 1.87. And what's this saying? Based on how people scored and responded, it overall increased the overall engagement by 1.87 points. So these are the things that we want to keep doing and keep maintaining. You'll also see the average response rate, the percentile it falls into, as well as a graph representing the percentage of people who fall either into favorable, neutral, or unfavorable. So these top 5s all capture the things that are going well. So we see another meaning that we've already talked about, utilization. My job makes good use of my skills and abilities. Another meaning, I feel the work I do on my job is valuable. And then purpose, another key component of having meaning within the role. I feel a shared sense of purpose with my team. All really great things that helped increase that overall engagement. These are the things we want to continue to pour into, reward, and celebrate. And again, this is using that background algorithm to pull these. So on the flip side, we'll look at the top 5 negative drivers. So what these are doing are these are actually pulling back that overall engagement score. And you again have the driver name, the statement. So walking through the first one, Westfield Washington Schools helps to limit the number of distractions that keep me from achieving my goals. Predictive impact, negative 1.35. So it actually pulled that score down. And again, you see the breakdown across the board. A couple more that pertain to capacity. So confidence and ability to think clearly at work. Fairness, I feel the rewards I get are equitable with the work I do. My job challenges me in a positive way, and being confident and able to handle competing demands at work. So these are the ones that are actually pulling that lever back. These are the things that if we pour efforts into at a district level, we can increase that overall engagement score. One more data point that we captured is what's familiar perhaps to you is what we call NPS. If you've ever been to a gas station and you've walked out and they have the smiley face, it's like, how clean were our bathrooms? And you can press that button, and you may be questionable in wanting to press that. But essentially it's asking, hey, how likely are you to recommend us as a company to work with? This is the employee version of that. So it's the Employee Net Promoter Score. It's a quick way to get a metric on how loyal and satisfied are employees here. And so it's going to ask them on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend Westfield Washington Schools as a great place to work. The scale then will be anyone who chose 9 to 10, they're considered promoters. They say, hey, come work here. It's a really great place to work. They're satisfied. The passives choose 7 and 8s, they're more neutral. And then detractors are anyone who chose a 0 to 6, they're considered unsatisfied. We then have the calculation up there for your knowledge of how that score is calculated. It's the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors. And this score can then be anything from negative 100 to positive 100. So what we had as a result for Westfield Washington Schools was 16. And if you're wondering where does that fall within other ranges, anything from 10 to 30 is considered good. Basically anything above 0 is also considered acceptable. 50 would be upper echelon companies, that's more rare to see. So 16, we're in a great place. We can only go up from here. And as you think about the breakdown, 41% are promoters. We also have 33.9% of passives. This is your area of greatest impact. These are the folks that we can move up to become promoters. The detractors may or may not ever move beyond that position. Okay. From here, we're going to do a deeper dive into those demographics that we mentioned, which we'll be covering department, role type, and tenure. So let me reorientate you to what you're seeing here. This is our department. And the way that we structured the data was breaking it down into either folks fell into either admin, non-certified, or certified. So those admin folks would be those principals, assistant principals, non-certified, anyone who is not teaching within the district, and then certified would be folks that are teaching. So you're going to have your engagement scale there on the left-hand side. That top bar, all participants, is just a reminder of the overall district scores. You can see that visual comparison. And then as we look at the breakdown by those 3 departments, the highest engagement there was for admin, which was 80.71. You then will see the response rate, percentile, the breakdown. I want to call out anything in gray just represent the amount of people who just didn't respond to the survey. You'll then have the total number of people invited that completed the survey out of those invited all the way to the right-hand side. I realize that's a little bit small, so I'll try to call that out when I make notable comments with that. The non-certified fell right in the middle there with 78.19, and then certified, again, still moderately engaged across the board, but 72.85 as we take a look at just breakdown by department. Any questions there? I'll pause before we dive deeper into the additional data cuts. Okay. All right, so we've got role type next. I want to let you know we've got about 4 slides of these. We have various roles within the district. So I'm going to do my best to call out what I think is notable to draw your eyes to. So it's going to go in order of highest engagement to lowest engagement. Starting out very strong, we have instructional coaches. So those folks were extremely engaged category with 88.1. Then it will move down. We see generalist tots, generalists all aboard. So we know those folks are working with the younger population. We didn't have as high of a response rate, but the folks that did respond are highly engaged. We also have instructional aides, all falling within that highly engaged range. Once we hit related arts, we're then moving into the moderately engaged category. Moving on to our second page here. All of these folks that fall into math, elective, special education, generalist 1, social studies, and EL all fall within moderately engaged. Moving on to page 3 here, all the way to generalist K, still continuing with moderate engagement. All the way down, we have generalists, school counselor, mentor, language arts. When we get to generalist 5, we start to enter the category of somewhat engaged.
Are you saying generalist 5s or 5th grade teachers?
I believe so, yep. Can you confirm, Tom? Yep.
So then what are just the, that's just plain generalist?
There is a category to confirm that's just generalist. Not sure what grade that may fall into. But we can get back to you on that if that's okay.
And the previous page, I think, it just said
Yep, right under generalist K, third down.
We have generalist K. We have special, we did related arts separate, right? You had a category for related. We had special education.
Yeah, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that, we categorized them, let me.
Yeah, we can definitely get
I'll
back to
do
you on that.
You keep going.
'Kay.
Let me do it quick.
That sounds good. Okay, so yep, so then we end there with generalist 5. And then getting into our 4th page of role types. Oops, catch up here. Office staff, somewhat engaged, science, somewhat engaged. Once we get to generalist 3, 4, 6, and 2 is where we get into the disengaged category. So we've already called that out in the executive summary as a watch out and an area to pour into there. Okay. Last data slice we're going to look at here is tenure. And I want to call out when we say tenure, it means how long people have been with the district. Doesn't necessarily correlate to how much experience they have or how long they've been teaching, just purely employed here. So starting off strong, we have 0 to 1 years, which is what you want to see. Folks are having a great experience in that first year. And then followed by that, we enter years 1 to 3. We then go to 9 to 12, followed by 3 to 6, and then 12 plus years, and then 6 to 9. So 0 to 1 years is highly engaged, 1 to 3 is moderately, all the way down. When we hit 6 to 9 years, that is somewhat engaged. That will take us through the data component of what we plan to walk through. We're then going to capture the high-level themes of the open-ended comments. There were roughly, I believe, 1,100 comments. Those were analyzed. We identified themes that made the most sense to capture holistically. So as we start with the positives, I want to call out that the word love was referenced and used 141 times. Love is a very strong word. It's something that is very encouraging to see, and it was broken down in really 3 areas of where people were expressing that love. The love for teaching. People love what they do. Even if they're frustrated, they run into difficulties, that is what gets them through the day. The love, the passion for what they do, the students they work with, the community, that comes out through and through. Love for Westfield Washington schools. There's a lot of loyalty. Folks call that out, even with growth and transition. They want to be here, and that's encouraging to see. Love for colleagues. I think we've all been in a position where the people you work with make or break your experience. So there is a lot of comments around being able to work with hardworking people. They feel like they have people to go when they need things. They're dedicated. They have positive working relationships and genuinely enjoy working with one another. If we move to the areas of improvement, oftentimes this is in most engagement surveys, communication is going to come up inevitably. So specifically for Westfield Washington schools, alignment. People feel perhaps there's a lack of alignment in what, when, how things are communicated, and often those breakdowns can lead to ambiguity, distrust, frustration. The other category was lack of visibility and trust. So some concerns about administrators perhaps not practicing what they preach, about building relationships, leading to a lack of trust and morale amongst staff. We've already called out that PLC was a theme within the survey itself. There was some general criticism of the effectiveness of it, the benefit of it, and perhaps folks feeling, I have my experience here, but I know that others have different experience and perhaps I want more of that. So some inconsistencies in what that experience is like for folks. So these are the high-level themes. From here, we will open the floor for any questions that folks have before we just talk through next steps, which Mandy essentially covered at the beginning.
Your mic.
The bottom 5 of
Sure.
the 17 drivers.
Yep. This one? Yep.
What's the percentile, like the 5th, 8th, 0, 10th, 22nd? What's that
Yeah.
representing?
Sure, so what the percentile is telling you is that based on the benchmark that it's comparing it to, it's telling you, so like for that first one, for that particular score, you would have scored higher than 5% of all of those within the database. So for like the last one, would have scored higher than 22% of those within the database.
Okay.
On the flip side, it's going to tell you, like that first one there, 95th percentile, you scored higher than 95% of the folks within that benchmark. Oh, sorry, to clarify, that's for 15.5 data. This is just within this platform. It's not global or anything else. It's just pulling within the data that they have within the system.
And I assume you do other school systems?
Yeah, and there is a benchmark for education. I will call out that when folks sign up for 15.5, you self-select. So anyone can choose education. So there's no clarity on if it's K through 8, it's college, what have you, and it's also a rolling 12-month benchmark. So we'll only use the data based on the last 12 months. So while it can be helpful to have comparison, your own year-over-year data is what's going to be most helpful to know if are we
Right.
moving the needle in the right direction.
Right. Okay.
I believe, and there might be others lumped in here,
Yeah.
but we have literacy teachers in the elementary school and some, I think at the intermediate school, that they work with all grade levels, they're not special education.
Okay.
And so they work RTI, MTSS, and so I think we just called them generalist and multiple grades. So
Okay.
if in the elementary or intermediate school, they work with both and weren't related arts, weren't special education, weren't
Yeah.
EL, we had a group that we just lumped into generalist.
That makes sense. Thanks for clarifying.
Will we get a copy of this? The-
Slide deck?
Yeah, of what your slide is going?
Absolutely.
Because I may have more questions. after I
And I'm happy to answer
soak it
that.
in.
I realize we're throwing a lot of data at you, and a lot of folks think best once they've had some time to sit with it. So happy to answer some follow-up questions if they do come up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions we can answer while we're here?
All right, go ahead.
So related to the opportunities that you laid out early on, the
Mhm.
generalists, 2, 6, 4, and 3,
Yeah,
those are our lowest scores, and where a lot of our energy could go to get a lot of improvement, it sounds like.
absolutely.
And so when you do the workshop, then
Mhm.
I assume the principal in each building will have a slice of just their respondents that fall in those categories for
Mhm.
targeted work or goal setting? Is that
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
that'll go Thursday?
So what we'll have is the principals will actually have a data sheet that is a high-level summary of those results for their school, right? Because when you dive into Slicer by school level, it could look a little bit different because we're just looking district overall. From there as a team, they're going to brainstorm, what do we have as priorities as a school for this year? What is the data telling us we need to work on? And then what do we want to determine is going to be most impactful and have the least amount of effort for us to do. So that may or may not get very role specific, but that's something that's also being tasked for the principals for their knowledge. Because in that workshop, we don't want to isolate any one particular role in that moment. It's going to be more high level. But yeah, and that's something that principals are aware of based as they go into the system on their own data.
You mentioned all the comments that were given at the beginning, that there were a lot of people commenting, a lot of words.
Yeah.
But nothing here shows any comments, so the administrator is going to get comments as well, because I feel like that's super important.
Oh, yeah.
Teachers or administrators and IAs, whoever, are taking time to give us feedback.
Sure.
I feel like that's an important piece that we need to see, and I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. So we take confidentiality and the protection of the employee voice very seriously. And so that is something that's available to the principals. And so we've done our best to summarize it for the leadership team. And that's as much as we feel is appropriate, because as much as the comments are confidential and anonymous, there are things that people share that can be identified. So to protect that, it is only shared with the leadership level team at that level. And that's for the psychological safety of those who participated, so they will continue to participate in surveys going forward.
I almost feel that's less likely to, because if principals can figure out who it is, then I think teachers will be less likely to speak up. And they're
Sure.
the ones most likely to guess who it is. I won't be able to guess who it is because I'm too far removed from it.
Sure. And so I will say John had a very intentional conversation with principals and how you handle
So-
that particular data.
Yeah, and so that, two things, I think, is the data they received is anonymized and confidential,
Mhm.
right? And so in talking with our legal team, right, that is protected. And so that's not something, everything we present, why you can have a slide deck, anyone in our community can have the slide deck, is because it is public record. When it's only shared with the one administrator in the school, it is not a public record, it is notes for that principal to take action on. And so they all agreed to a confidentiality statement and signed it to have access to that. And so that's where we made the decision to stop. And ultimately, it is their responsibility to take action on that data. And if they don't, then we'll hold them accountable for that. And I'm not trying to be heavy-handed about that, but like, I'm taking this survey very seriously. There will be, I don't know if you want to speak to the action plans and the next step.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Of what will happen on Thursday. And then with their teams, because they have a slice at this leadership summit of all the teams that did participate in the survey. So even as they do this work on Thursday,
Yeah.
so you make a great point on, or Mandy did, on, not focusing on what's wrong, but focus on what
Matters.
matters, right? So I believe educators, and it's reflected in this data, are very passionate about what they do. They also know how to grade and provide feedback. So they also, when they focus down, know probably better than anyone what those one or two things are that if we would do would make a huge difference, right? So that's the goal of this whole thing. Not to choose 5, not to choose 1. Yes, we know there are distractors. The cleanliness of a school, that's not for the principals to address. That's my responsibility in the district team. The visibility, the communication, all those pieces, we're going to create an action plan as well for the district based on this data.
Yeah.
And then we'll report out regularly to the school board and to the public who we're accountable to. So maybe if you talk about
Yeah.
the steps Thursday of what are going to happen, because at the end of the day, the action is what's really important.
Yeah.
And the action reflective of the comments, like we'll know the next time we do this, whether
yeah.
whether we addressed it or not, right? I
Yeah.
think that's what we heard last time when we did the climate audit that didn't happen, that we're not
Yes.
going to allow to happen again. So these conversations are conversations I've had with the principals.
Yes, yeah, and I would say the comments just help bring the numerical data to life, and that's appropriate for the principals to know and to utilize. as we think about the action planning, but when we move in tomorrow, those are not going to be shared. That's protected data. But what we will be sharing is a high-level summary of each school's data. We'll then do a little bit of a teach like we did with you all, so folks know what they're looking at. This is new for most of them. From there, we'll get them into brainstorming ideas. So you saw some of those bottom 5. What are some things that you think we could do to improve that? That will be that brainstorming session that they'll utilize. We'll then utilize basically by school options to determine, okay, great, we've got all ideas, nothing's off the table, there are no silly ideas. We're gonna then plot them. So it helps bring that group to consensus. The principals will be facilitating that discussion, and it's not giving input, it's just saying, okay, is this high effort? Is it high impact? And we're plotting that. That will help then get them down to hopefully a couple, maybe 5. The goal is 1 to 2. We'll then do a walk around where they can go to other schools, get some other ideas, see what they're doing. But the goal is for each school to walk out with 1 to 2 action items, and then we're gonna share. So there's a level of accountability within that workshop. Everyone is leaving knowing, hey, this is what we plan to work on. We've all built into it, we're bought in, and we wanna make that change happen. Because what we say is, the worst thing you can do is launch another survey without having taken any action. People will start to feel defeated and wonder what the point is. So this is all best practice, and that's what John has implemented, and we feel really good about that plan as well.
So then ultimately what will happen is we will replicate that process with the school teams around the academic data. Ryan's gonna try to touch on just the high level of that, but we just received it.
Oh, okay.
So then the idea there is we've created an action plan around culture and engagement that has a goal or 2, and then we will also then roll in a academic goal or 2. Once those are completed, the principals will, and their teams will share that on the first teacher workday back from the feedback. Here's what we heard, what we learned, what we discussed. We had ideas at the leadership summit. And this is what we've decided to do this year related to not only the engagement survey, but we've always had academic goals. But they'll be aligned, and then the principals and the team will say, and then we're gonna collect feedback and data on how we're doing as the year goes on these, right? And then we'll measure it at the end. We will also then share those action plans with the board. Those are public action plans that are happening. And my hope would be at some point during the year in a work session, we can break the schools down. We haven't thought about the manageable, where every principal can come to the board. It'd probably be maybe we go elementary, middle level, and maybe high school because they're big. And so again, that clarity, that alignment, that question, so everyone knows, here's what we're working on, here's what we're monitoring, and here's what you can hold us accountable to. That's the plan.
Now, these action plans that that the principals come up with and everything else, are they gonna be able to be measurable throughout the year? So like halfway through the year, okay, we're heading in the right direction, we had a little hiccup, but we're still heading in the right direction?
Yeah.
Things like that, or is it just a matter of an opinion?
No, it should, and that's the guide is, hey, we want to create things that are measurable, but then also with the survey, right? If you're doing action items that align with maybe a lower scoring driver, that resurvey will tell us, okay, we're actually moving the needle here as we think about it. So there are some options for pulse surveys, so you don't have to do the whole thing again. You can do targeted questions to see, hey, are we actually moving the needle here?
I'm going to, because Ryan now is in charge of curriculum, but also the data falls underneath there. Do you want to respond?
Sure, yeah, so like Kristen said, Mike, there's gonna be the engagement piece that we will do action plans on, but concurrently, we will also have, we still will always do, every principal on their guiding coalition, their school leaders always do what I would call kind of a school goals, school improvement plan, or just they'll look at their data and then set goals that maybe are more specific towards specific like iLearn or iRead or things like that. So they'll be doing those kind of at the same time, and there's a lot of crossover from both of those areas. But to your question of can we track that, or can we sort of diagnose as we go, there are things now, they're called the checkpoints that are through the state that we will do 3 times throughout the year. We also do a thing called, we've talked about Dibbles before, that we have now for math and language arts that we do 3 times throughout the year. So one of the things we do is we, as we're teaching, is then we assess at various times throughout the year and then can do reporting as how we're attaining those goals as we go. And that's actually grades K all the way up through 8th. And then at the high school, we have some other measures in place. So the answer to your question is yes, we can do that concurrently with our engagement information as well.
We will, this 15.5 is a software system. So the action plans will actually be loaded into that system. So the pulse survey that can be utilized, which is not the full survey, around the action plan can provide us feedback on how each principal and school, specific to them, how they're doing, right? Without having to do the big survey again.
That was going to be my next question. So it's going to be school-specific,
Right.
not just overall, everything else.
So the central office team, I don't know if you want to go back to that slide,
Which one?
way back on the high level, some things that were not positive, I think.
Oh, got it, okay. The summary.
Communication, visibility, it's way back at the beginning. The PLC process, right? Yeah. There's also, I would say, this underlining, we're putting a lot on teachers' plates, right?
Sure.
So the goal of this action plan and to integrate it is not to say, oh, we have one now for the engagement survey. We have one for our data. We have one for whatever. It's one process. Now, this is new, so it's like, we're riding a bike and we're working through that. That's why we're starting small. One would be okay for the engagement survey. But then central office will do one as well, right, around whether it's the cleanliness or whatnot. We have, and then we'll do an action plan, and we'll put that in the system as well. So if we want that high level on how the school district is doing, we can do a pulse survey on that as well. Now, I will tell you, you probably have seen, Mike Hall's not here, but he has a dashboard around operations. So let's just, the cleanliness one, he has some things in place that he's trying to do to collect data on that, on transportation operations, food service, those things under his responsibility. So we're not going to get rid of those. They worked really hard last year, but we're going to try to, again, integrate into. Again, the PLC process, what I take from this is, one, we're not consistently implemented. Some places it's working well and people are talking positively about it. Some places it's not implemented well and it's become a distraction or something else that's on teachers' plates, right? And it's not supposed to be done during prep time. We set aside time on Wednesday to do that. So that is a training and a leadership piece that will be a focus of the school district for our principals on, because leading the PLC process is different than doing the PLC process. So that's a piece that we'll need to be working on. It'll be part of our action plan.
Very good. I know some of the feedback I've gotten just verbally is, putting so much on somebody's plate and then it gets full, we're not taking anything off, we're just giving them another plate.
Right.
So we need to work on that as far as that goes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, sorry, going back to the comments. So if principals are the only ones seeing the comments, no one here is seeing the comments, where's the oversight to the principals, is what I guess I was getting at partly. If they're the ones seeing it, you're not seeing, John's not seeing it, Chris isn't seeing it, Greg's not seeing it, how do you know if the principals are telling you what they saw is accurate, and where's the oversight there? And again, just pointing out, a lot of the teachers were afraid to answer this because they didn't want repercussions from their principals. And how do we
So-
guard against, the principal
So
signed a piece of paper, but how do we
Yeah.
reassure the teachers that there's,
Yeah, so the first piece is there is some oversight. So we have had some sessions initially with leadership and advisor where I have had access to some information at a high level. Have I reviewed all the information? No. I believe that's the principal's responsibility. They are sitting down with us, and they have done a reflection. They will do another one. So I believe I can honestly, with the information I have, know how deeply they looked at that and how personally they take it. And I think they are really engaged in this process. The second piece, and I hear this a lot, right? And I'm a lifetime educator. I'm the son of educators. Educators in Westfield, Washington, if they do this repercussion things, they won't be a part of this organization, right? That's not what we do, right? That's not, like, I get that, like, an effective organization that is a high-performing organization talks about and takes action on those things that are hard to deal with, hard to talk about, sometimes, things that maybe shouldn't have happened. The only effective way to address them and get better is to name them and move forward, right? I'm not the type of person that is, I want to get better every day, and I want everybody that's in this district to get better. That's one of our things. We hire the best, we help them get better. So I understand that there is a human nature piece of that, but, with this survey, the reason we are being so cautious is we're setting the tone that that doesn't happen in this district. If a mistake is made or someone doesn't respond the way that we call the Westfield way, we're going to address it, we're going to apologize, we're going to show people we care, and we're going to move on. And that's how we're going to operate. And again, it's going to start in this chair and with the leadership team. So I get it and I understand it, but I also don't want that to be something that because I hear a lot why we didn't address an issue. If we have an issue, it has to be addressed, plain and simple. I need to know about it. That's, I think, my responsibility, and then it's my responsibility to see that it's addressed in an appropriate manner. Now, we might not always agree with how it's addressed, but we're going to bring a resolution to it. So that's my response to that, Carrie, is, and I understand there might be initially the baseline why we did this, a lack of trust. That, I think there was an underlining even in there. You said some of that, the visibility. That's why our action plan and the way we move forward from central office is extremely important and critical in this, especially this next 12 months. So that's my commitment to the district and to the teachers who are the heartbeat of our district.
I would just like to add, I think for the last couple of years, when PK was here and you guys were offering roundtables at all the buildings, I think if we're to this point and we have a very small percentage making comments that they're not loving Westfield, then that group should have or can have soon a direct conversation if they feel, Carrie, that they can't go to their principal. Because I feel like you keep repeating that there's a group that needs to be heard. So if there's a group that needs to be heard and they put it on the survey, or the people that didn't put it on the survey, they need to come forward and they need to explain their concern, and we need to work through it. Because if nobody knows it, only the principal, and people are saying the principal aren't handling it, it will never get addressed. It's just like if my kid needs something and they don't tell me, I don't know they need it, right? Like, it's no different. I don't know why we're not trusting the system. So I
Well,
have all faith in the system.
Yeah, and I do too, and I appreciate your comments. I think, the culture being approachable and where we are today, I think, just over the last 10 years, a lot of things have changed, right? But I believe we are positioned as a school district, as a destination community to really have an impact and do something special. So that's the culture we're going to create. Like, we are going to value the voice of our professionals out on the front line. We're going to empower them. There has to be guardrails. Everyone knows that. We'll set the guardrails. That's what board policies is, the beginning piece, and administrative guidelines. But then from that point, right, we have to be tight on the things we know we need to be tight on, and it's really important to be tight on what's important. And then we need to be loose and to trust, trust is not only built, trust is given. So there is a piece where we give trust to our teachers as well in doing their job. The main thing I want, like, in the act, whether it's action plan, we're trying to create this collaborative culture where we all take collective responsibility for the kiddos in our care, right? We're gonna work together as a team. And so in this district, you have to work on a collaborative team because that's the way to get better results. And that's the focus, but we're gonna take that feedback and improve that process. And so, again, I'm willing to, that's my number one goal, listen to anyone, and I'll start that process, because there are areas that we do need to get better, and I think they've been highlighted by this survey, and so we're gonna take that and we're gonna get to work.
So
that-
Thursday, you're gonna go to all the principals, well, you're meeting at the middle school, or were you meeting at high school?
Yeah, be at a
So the
church.
middle school LGI is out of commission. The restrooms are not ready to go. Some of them are, so we didn't want to go there. And so the best thing to handle, because we're gonna have about 150 to 180 people. So we're going to Stacy Pratt's church. What is it called? Sorry to call you. Huh?
College
College
Park
Park.
Church.
Park.
They have invited us free of cost to use their facility. We're very grateful, and it'll get us kind of out of the schools to do this work, a lot of space, great opportunity to build some camaraderie for our school teams. And I'm grateful, I think it says something about the educators in this district that less than 2 weeks before we start schools, they're willing to give a day of their time to prepare and to plan, and they know it's kind of built around this action plan. So we're excited. That's the kind of a commitment, engagement that we've seen, that people love Westfield.
And this is all the principals and assistant principals, and who else is showing up, I guess, besides central office people?
So those two groups are instructional coaches. and then-
Instructional coaches.
And then the core group, though, that shows up is what we call our CTLs, our leaders, basically our team leaders or our guiding coalition, so collaborative team leaders. So we'll have, depending on the size of the school, so obviously like Alicia at the high school will have, because of the size of her staff, we'll have, 35 to 40 people there. Most of our elementaries will have anywhere from about 12 to 14, and then our middle school will have 20, 24-ish, and essentially every one of the teams. We talked about them. So like at one elementary, they have a CTL for kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and then they have one for related arts. So it's really the leaders of each of the areas who will serve on the leadership team of that school.
And
So-
then Alicia would have more by department, so she'll have an Algebra 1 collaborative team leader, but then her department chair, we call CAD, Curriculum Area Director, would be there as well. So she'll have her whole team that's leading that academic focus.
Right, so central office, I have what they want the schools to do, their goals, and then it'd be broken down to high school, middle school, elementaries for that. And then Mike Hall and his staff, I assume he's gonna be there, or
No,
is that
Mike-
part
Mike
of
and-
that?
No, Mike and his staff will not be a part of that day. They have.
Okay,
We did some things in the administrative retreat with them.
okay,
So the people at this are really our school-based teachers and staff.
Okay.
They're not the operational staff.
so all
People
those,
who work in a school building.
so that, whatever message you guys send out is gonna be heard by everybody at the same time. So when they leave, everybody should be saying the same thing from central office.
Yeah,
And then coming
right,
from
yeah.
each school, you guys will present that part of it.
Yeah, yeah,
and
this is,
everything
and
else.
this is the third time that this is our third annual leadership summit. And then they'll take they're planning their day And they've done this even before we arrived in some way. We've just, with Dr. Kaiser, we did it together, and actually Ryan came up with how, the Leadership Summit, so that we worked on the alignment piece, which was part of his goal when he was in here, so that happened, right? Like, there's a common focus across the district on what we're working on. Now, each school's at a different place, so they need to focus on where they are in the process, but we're all doing the same process.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Go ahead and disconnect.
Krista, Mandy,
Yeah,
thank you.
final questions? Yeah, thank you.
We will send you pictures from College Park tomorrow
Excellent.
when we go there. We're allowed to get in for setup, just so you have an idea of what the facility looks like, okay?
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's transition to, is Brent and CSO here? We're going to go right into the next item on the agenda is our facility master plan. So as they come and get set up, I'm going to introduce hi Brent.
Hey guys.
How you doing? Thanks for being here. Okay, I'll let them introduce themselves when they get set up. But, so we are, and Brent will cover this a little bit, the projects we have going on, but Destination Westfield is an ongoing focus on improving our facility needs. And CSO led a facility study, was that 22 or 23, Brent? What did we call it? It was kind of both, wasn't
It
it?
was started in the spring of '22, and we kind of wrapped towards the end of '22, and then announced Destination Westfield there, I think, in the spring of '23.
And then we got rolling with some, several projects that were needed. And Dr. Kaiser often said that what we're doing right now is just getting us caught up. And so as the process moved forward and we received some clarity on our growth, where the city was, since that last facility, we have a new mayor, a whole new city council, and we have clear direction on where we're going with a comprehensive plan and soon to be a interim census to find out what our current population is, and then they'll be able to predict based on the comp plan what our build out will be. Also, that we hadn't made a decision of, and then I'm going to really turn it over to you, is the 1 or 2 high school scenario, right? Like, we kind of kicked that can down the road, and what we believe now is that we need to start with a master plan build out with this data we're going to have, and get feedback from the board on where we are. If there's anything that you have questions on or anything you want to provide us direction on, this is a touch point of this master plan. Then with, again, I'm going to stick with the theme, hopefully next steps in creating an action plan that we ultimately are going to have to put funding to, and then monitor as we grow, right? So we have asked CSO, Meyer Najum, and Context Design's a part of that as well. These are current partners with us to work together to do that master plan. And there are several components that Brent's going to update you on tonight. So I will turn it over to CSO and our architect, Brent Height.
Thank you, Dr. Atha. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys this evening. Excited to be here and share with you where we've kind of been working over the last 4 to 6 weeks. A lot of information, and so I'm going to do my best to get through it all, as well as not forget anything that's important. So bear with me a little bit. We have kind of our full team here, so you should see some familiar faces out in the audience. And Mrs. Dennison in the back. I'm going to Alicia, I'm going to call you up at some point here to provide some input on the high school piece. So as we start out, I want to first kind of revisit where we started this from, kind of the last master plan and where we left off. When we started that, the objectives were pretty clear in terms of looking at implementing grade level realignment. So at the time we were talking about eliminating a transition at the intermediate school and what that looked like, and then how does that impact all of our existing buildings. We know we needed to expand capacity as enrollment and continue to grow, and really looked and dialed in at that middle level learner level. So 5th grade to 8th grade was really kind of a high focus area for us in that, and making sure we were making really good student-centered decisions for them. In addition to those 3 things, there was a lot of focus on expanding support facilities for the district that were rapidly becoming too small and undersized to facilitate for you guys moving into the future. So there's been a significant investment in those as well over the last few years. The summary slide that I have here came directly from the last presentation of the master plan that you guys have seen, basically showing kind of where our realignments were happening. At the time, we were looking at getting to 8 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and an addition on the high school. At the time, we also were kind of looking at, the thought process was we need to add a little bit of a capacity at the current high school to get us to the point where we can make the decision of, are we going to be 2 high schools or 1? So that was kind of the foundation. So everything in that original master plan was kind of predicated on that. And I think we very quickly saw, and the administration saw, that, hey, if we're 6,000 total students, 9 through 12, does it make sense to add on to the high school or not? And so I think those conversations kind of started to happen very rapidly. So from a progress standpoint, I commend you guys have done a lot over the last few years from that master plan. So this is just a list of the projects that have kind of been undertaken, some complete, some in construction, some nearing completion. So I think that's a testament to your leadership here with the administration, past administration, and you guys to really undertaking quite a bit. So just want to let everybody pat themselves on the back a little bit. We've done a lot, right? So from here, where do we go? That's kind of where we were tasked and brought in. So our current kind of objectives, as we've talked with the administration about what we need to be focusing on, is still continue to expand capacity to meet that growing enrollment. That's still really important, and maybe need number 1 that we've got to have our eyes on at all times to make sure that we're keeping up. We need to understand what facilities are required for total district build out. So as I mentioned in the previous master plan, we were really focused on that initial grade level realignment and current, kind of next 5 to 10 years maybe, where this time we want to take a look at what do we look like in 20, 30 years when we're completely built out, how many facilities we have, and then how are they going to come online over what duration of time. So that's kind of the end goal of this. Which I meant, there's the item 3 there, establish that projected timeline for that, as well as John mentioned, with the new comprehensive plan coming out, the new census data coming out, that will really help inform us kind of for the whole entirety of your district. So right now we're operating on what I'll admittedly old information from a demographic projection standpoint. It's all from 2023. So a lot has changed since 2023, and so we're doing the best we can to project forward, and even making some amendments to the data we have because we know things have grown faster or grown slower. So we're add acceleration onto certain demographic projections to make sure that we're being as conservative as possible so we don't get in a bad predicament. And then the last item on here, number 4, is determine the desired long-term approach to maintaining 1 high school campus for the entire district. So we have heard that directive, that's the way we're going, that is the future of Westfield High School, but what does that mean? And so we're really going to parse that out tonight with you guys a little bit, as well as kind of share with you some of the conversations we've had with the high school administration and leadership team there. So as we started embarking on this process, we started asking some heavy questions, I think especially about the high school, that caused a little bit of pause and a little bit of oh my, we haven't been talking about this. And we have ongoing projects and work in some of these facilities that maybe we need to think about a little bit more. So that includes renovations at the current middle school. That project was intentionally brought to bring equity to the current middle school west as it opens in 2 years. And I think as you go through this, you'll see why we started to have some pause about that project. the high school stage expansion, the high school band room, high school classroom addition, and the high school locker room building, and some infrastructure for detention and parking lots. Or an additional project, as we said, hey, this project is really predicated on the previous master plan that said we're only going to add 1,000 students to this campus maximum. Well, actually, we're going to add 3,000 students to this campus, and we need to think about all of the facilities that support that high school and what that means for them. So all of those, we started to ask some questions about, hey, are these the right decisions we're making right now? We don't want to see you make a bad investment now and then us live with it for the next 30 years because we didn't have all of the information at the table. So that's just for your consideration and knowledge that those were concerns we had, and I think at this point those projects have kind of been paused so that we can parse out what the future of the high school looks like and what the impact to those projects will be. And so that just for your awareness, and we'll probably have future conversations about what that means. So as I mentioned, we are going to stay one high school district. Enrollment projections are to reach 5,500 to 6,000 students. And not only do we need to think about what are we at 6,000 students, we need to figure out the roadmap to get there and how we would phase implement something to get us there. Because we're not just going to build an additional 3,000 space for 3,000 students day one. We've got to figure out how do we phase that in over time, financially support it, and strategically do it so that it's at least disruptive as it can be to your campus. So that's kind of the long-term goal. But in addition to that, we want to think about what is the Westfield High School experience. So I would argue that Destination Westfield or Westfield Washington Schools as a destination school district, your high school experience is the capstone of that experience. And we want to make sure that we're being really sensitive to what makes Westfield High School unique and really great, and a district that other high schools are already envying and want to become. And so what makes that special and important? And how do we make sure that we maintain that as we double the student population of that school? So we sat down and had a session with Alicia and her leadership team at the high school and started talking about some of these things of very high level, what a school should be, what a school should have, what things should we rethink, what things should we stop. And the one that I'm going to highlight here is what is sacred. So what is sacred to Westfield High School? And you can kind of read some of those things, but sense of belonging, professional learning communities for their teachers, collaboration spaces, school pride, academic rigor, student-driven programming are all things that they highlighted as things that make Westfield unique in terms of a high school experience and things that we want to make sure as we look at growing, we maintain. At this point, Alicia, I'll ask you to come up and just share some of your thoughts from our visioning session.
Was that? Not changing the colors, no. No, so just to go off of that, I think, when we talk about our culture at Westfield, it really is the culture of family and, our motto being every rock valued, every rock connected, and then every rock ready. And so the idea of that individual student, I think when we first thought about doubling in size, first you go through, honestly, you go through that shock and go, did we really sign up for that? Is that what we want? How do we preserve just making each student feel valued? The wonderful aspect is the amount of opportunities we can offer, right? The amount of opportunities, programming, curricular and extracurricular we can offer in just continuing to have a staff and an environment that pours into students. So that was really our conversation is, what do we need to preserve? And as we started talking about those things, it was the idea that as people tour our building, so as parents come in, as families come in, as we have other schools come and visit, a lot of what they say is your physical space is truly a manifestation of your culture, which is that collaborative culture. So it begins with our professional learning communities, with our teachers working in teams, all focused on student learning, and offering students those opportunities to reach their full potential and have those opportunities. So where we are now is they work in proximity to one another, and you've seen our collaborative spaces, our pod spaces, where you really see our hope is is that students see that collaborative atmosphere that our teachers have and that exciting, authentic, innovative, engaging experience that is a part of our physical building, and it becomes contagious to the students. And then they become collaborators and team workers and have those visitors. So we knew that some of that creativity that has been part of our physical design and then also a manifestation of our culture, we can't lose that, right? Even as we grow, we can't lose, our value is in the people, right? And so if our staff doesn't feel that valued, if our students don't feel that, we're going to lose that. So, but we know how much of an impact the space we build will have. And so then we started just talking about, this can't be something that we're band-aiding or piecemealing together. So we really started to brainstorm together, what does it look like to have that kind of cohesive flow in different things? How do we incorporate it so this is still an environment where people want to be? So, a couple other things. You've seen all of our lab spaces, just the hands-on component that has become Westfield High School. And that's in our core classes, our core academic areas, where they're doing the project-based learning, where they are just around the table. And it's also in, a lot of our work-based in our CTE programming and things like that. And then we also talked about how much more we've expanded to have that community involvement now, more than ever. Each year doubling the amount of students involved in work-based learning and internships. And how does it look like to create a campus that is a part of our community as well, right? Because when you get big, if you want to preserve the idea of community and family, which we do, I remember us talking about leaning into the fact that we're right in heart of downtown, and what does it look like to create a space that's also with our community, serving our community, partnering with our community. So we appreciate that CSO has had us just think big, but I love the fact that we're talking about how do we preserve what's so special about the place and how student-focused and student-centered it is, and then kind of go from there. Brent, what else would you like me to share? Anything I didn't?
I think you did an excellent job. I can't think of anything. Stephanie, can you think of anything else to cover there?
Maybe if there were a couple of philosophical test fit scenarios where we talked about maybe that wouldn't be the best approach, or other districts that we talked through that
Okay.
on growth.
So I know we'll have to, decide what our model will be as we expand. So we talked a little bit about the freshman center idea. I know that you've heard it thrown out there, what if the existing middle school campus became a part of the high school? And I think that's still on table, talking about how we utilize that space there. I know from a philosophical standpoint, as we talked with our team, the freshman center idea didn't seem to fit with our culture. And part of that is because we have so many courses that are 9 to 12, and I love that. I love the fact that there are grade level disciplinary courses where they're working together and where they can just be a part of so many things, and so I think to isolate would also be kind of hard, because it would be, they go from middle school, then it's another transition, and I feel like we'd be limiting opportunities with that model. And so we talked through that. I do think it's important we continue to explore all possibilities, and obviously we have to look at space, we have to look at fiscally, what we can do, but we did talk about that. And then another thing we just began to talk to is, we talked about a career center or or kind of special programming going over at the middle school, which I think it is a better idea to just think about what programming could be over there where there are already some advantageous spaces, and there's already, with our Shamrock Station, some of that happening anyway. But we'll have to find a way to serve, 1,000+ students over in that building when you think about that. And the other piece I think is important is when we talk about the culture of community in the building, the more we can keep things in one campus and expand out and use our existing campus, I think the better. in terms of just preserving that collaborative culture where teachers are working together in teams and where students, you know, have the ability to be in kind of the main hub. So we've talked through those kind of things. What does it look like to utilize the middle school? What are some different possibilities? And I think they'll post some of that.
So a few other just things for you guys to consider. As you look at becoming a 5,500 to 6,000 student high school, you will be in fairly select company. There are maybe 10 high schools around the country that reach to that size in terms of a suburban setting like you guys are. Obviously, one of them is your neighbor to the south. When we were with the team from the high school, we did take a visit and walked through the high school at Carmel. I personally had never been through more than some of the athletic spaces. I don't know what your guys' experiences there are. But I think if you walked through Westfield High School and then walked through Carmel High School, you would very quickly realize there's a different emphasis on how things are done from an academic standpoint primarily. And I think we have been given the opportunity to think long-term so that we can build out long-term rather than make a 5-year decision every 5 years to expand and meet the capacity need. So really trying to make sure we do it right. Rather than just accomplish the butts and seats, as it were. As Alicia mentioned, we very quickly kind of came to a realization up front that if we are a 6,000 student high school, we probably are not going to operate a 1,500 student middle school right across the street, and then a 750 to 800 student elementary right down the street from there. We are very landlocked. That's going to be a key constraint. So. I think we all very quickly came to the conclusion that it's likely the middle school needs to be relocated off campus. I think that also solves some of the equity issues with the new middle school on the west side of town, where we could build a second middle school as a prototype somewhere else. That opens up that campus to become part of the high school for that future enrollment. And so this is just an aerial view of what kind of that area looks like to give you that kind of optical illustration. Now, what's interesting is there are still logistics here to figure out of, you know, Hoover is still a barrier, and how do we safely send students across the street throughout an academic day? As we think about Carmel's campus as an example, I would argue that they have prioritized academics and curricular pieces connected to their high school building. Everything else became secondary and moved off-site. I know we've already had some conversations about not having a great appetite for continuing to move things off campus, but if you look around at your Hamilton County neighbors, that's what most districts have done. Noblesville, HSE, Fishers, they've all moved athletics away from the high school building or to satellite places to create space to expand the building. Not saying that's the right solution here, just those are the observations that we're making. I think ultimately we will have to make the decision about whether the real estate that the middle school offers us is more important than the square footage the middle school offers us, to Alicia's point of wanting as much connection as possible. Now, there's a whole lot of financial conversation that probably has to go around that. So while it might be a great pie in the sky idea, we may never get there. So we're well aware of that, and that's kind of our next step of exploring, is really to kind of vet that out a little bit. So a few other things to consider is how will space impact culture? So that's kind of that question that we're posing is the collaborative environments that have been created at the high school really influence what happens in that building, and we want to make sure that continues forward. What program components need to be prioritized on the high school? An example of this might be the current auditorium space. As we think about that, which is the next line item there, 3, what size do some of these facilities need to be? In the discussions that I've learned from the current project, most of the improvements are all surrounded about the stage and improving that experience for students. And there's been no concern about the house size from a capacity standpoint. Well, that's at 3,000 students. At 6,000 students, is that still true? And if it's still true, great. But if it's not, we don't want to spend X million dollars in the stage and then 5-10 years from now be like, man, this is really a bit small for what we need. And so we're just asking some of those questions now to make sure we're making good decisions long-term. And then to that point as well, the auditorium is a space that sits empty most of the academic day. That's true of every high school around the country because it's a performance space that's usually used after hours. So if we're prioritizing academic use space on the high school campus, should the auditorium be there? Or should that space be used for some other prioritized academic use? What that could be, I don't have an answer to that yet. That's something that we would explore if that's something that we have the appetite for. Another thing to think about is how are we going to circulate students, staff, and buses on this site? Hoover and Union are pretty small. If you've been there during pickup and drop-off, it is a congested area already. To some degree, you could argue that we are already circulating 6,000 or so kids on that campus between the middle school and high school. But for the high school, we'll essentially be doubling the number of student drivers, doubling the number of buses, doubling the number of parent pickup and drop-off. So that's a lot of circulation that's got to move through that campus. And then the last item I have here, which we've heard mentioned, is how does your campus, and as you grow into it, impact what's happening downtown and in Grand Junction? And is there a really nice community development piece where you guys can start to complement each other or influence each other? Stephanie is a Westfield resident and has talked about, well, can I go downtown to the farmer's market on a Friday night, grab dinner, and then walk to a football game at the high school? Like, that's the experience that we can try to help collaborate with the city on and help influence maybe some of the decisions they're going to make by some of the decisions you're going to make. So that's a lot of high level, big question things. A few of the kind of brass tacks things. This is the same capacity analysis we did in the last master plan to determine what is the current capacity of the high school. Now that is relative a little bit based on how efficiently they can operate. So if you'll remember in 2017, we built a lot of teacher workspaces and teacher lounge spaces so that classrooms could be more shared. So the more we can do that, the more kids we can get in that building. So right now we're using the 3,200 number as the capacity of the high school. It could probably get a little bit higher than that. It's going to start to get a little uncomfortable, but that's not uncommon. And so that's kind of where our starting point is. We kind of took this exercise that we did in 2017 to create the program for that addition to figure out how big or how much square footage is going to be required to get to that 5,500 to 6,000 student mark. So we took the subjects, took the enrollment rates. I'm not going to explain all the math because that's not really important to you guys. But essentially, that bottom right number of 106 is we need an additional 106 teaching stations. So 106 classroom settings to teach students when you're totally built out. That totals 250. So we have 144 today, so we're adding 106. So that's, again, back to almost doubling the number of spaces you are. The other thing we want to think about, too, is our teachers. So we're now, like if you look at math, where there's 39 to 40 teaching stations required, so a department is now 40 teachers. How do you run a professional learning community with 40 teachers? How do you locate them in a building that's operating departmentally? You know, those are some big questions we want to ask, because not only is it important for how they teach, but we also want to be able to attract teachers as they're looking for jobs. We want to retain teachers, and they want to, you know, in a big school like this, we want to make it a positive that they're working with 40 of their peers, not a negative. So that's something we're aware of. If you just quick calculations, rough calculations, that's 275,000 square feet of educational space. That number does not include anything like additional gyms, additional auditoriums, any kind of specialty areas. That's just kind of classroom space. And that's just based very conceptually, very high level on a kind of an exercise we went through. The current high school is, I believe, 575,000 square feet. So we're talking about 50% more square footage on that high school building or elsewhere that we're going to need to satisfy this requirement. For reference, as we've talked a little bit about how could we use the existing middle school as part of the high school campus, there are 87 teaching stations in that building, or 87 classroom settings in that building. So even if we say, yep, middle school is now part of the high school, we're still short a little bit in terms of the number of spaces we need. And that doesn't necessarily take into account any renovations or changes to that building that might need to happen to make it align more with whatever the Westfield High School, you know, long-term experience is. As we look at enrollments, current capacity at 3,200. There's two kind of lines of thought here, and don't get too hung up on the numbers just yet, but the top line there is the demographic study that was from 2023. The bottom left is a table that we've created from the IDOE using historical enrollments to basically tracking from 2024 to 2011 how your growth has gone from grades 9 through 12. So it's averaged, especially over the last 3 to 4 years, at about 90 to 100 students per year. And we've used that as a number, as a way to project forward. If we're going to gain 90 to 100 students a year, what does that look like? So in the middle table, kind of on the bottom, where you see historical and then projection. Projection is the line item from the table above from the demographic study. Historical is us projecting forward an average number of 90 or 100 students forward. So with that in mind, to hit 3,200, we're talking about 2029, 2028 of when that's going to be a problem, right? When we're going to have to start to look for more space. If we're thinking that taking over the middle school is the right solution as becoming part of the high school campus, to get a new middle school built, which we're going to talk about in the middle school piece of this, the earliest that's going to happen is 2030. So there is going to be some short-term, a couple years here where how do we satisfy that requirement? And there are solutions to this. It's not unheard of, and your sister districts, especially Fishers and HSE, have lived this, of whether that's portable classrooms, whether that's continuing with a piece of the current high school project that is adding classroom space, or even seeing, is there room in the middle school once in 2027 when we shift to grade 6, 8, and 2 buildings, there should be additional space in that building that could potentially be used for high school. We would just have to think through logistically how on earth that works, right? So I think there are options for us to not have to make a quick decision just to make it, and we can make sure we make the right decision long term. As we look at capital investments here, there's a long laundry list of items that have kind of been discussed. I don't think I would get too hung up on these in terms of the list and the cost. We're definitely going to work through that as we move forward. Really, the big takeaway here is defining the long-term vision and approach to being one high school. So we need to validate the current project scope and how it aligns with that long-term plan, determine the future use of the current middle school campus and how that may or may not tie in. We need to look at our finances and see what can we conceptually bring to bear, as well as what's that long-term overlook. Is it over 10 years, 20 years, et cetera? And consider the long-term implications, I think, of what the elementary school that remains on that site continues to be from a long-term perspective, if it's in the right place or not. I'm trying to think of anything I've forgotten here. What I'd like to do is I'll just pause and let you guys ask any questions you have on the high school piece before I move to middle school, because I know that was a lot of information.
You said looking forward, we'll have to add 50% more of what we already have.
Mm-hmm.
With middle school, can we do that on the campus it's at now? Or is that
So
because of all the wetlands we have around there and all the retention stuff?
yeah, there's a ton of
Gas lines?
A ton of restrictions, right? Yeah, you've got pipelines and wetlands, and we've got to do detention, and so the short answer is I can't tell you that for sure yet. There's a design exercise that needs to happen to kind of next for us to kind of dial in on exactly what that looks like, because it gets pretty specific down into it's these types of spaces and this is how they're configured. My gut reaction is to tell you yes, with the caveat that that means there are some things on campus that might have to go elsewhere. So again, Carmel model, right? If everything is attached to the main building, parking goes across the street. Athletics go across the street or somewhere else. So you've got to think about how you think of the real estate of campus a little bit differently. So, and there are parts of Carmel High School also that are 3 stories. So going up instead of out may be something else we need to consider.
So I saw a couple different numbers up there. I think one said 6.
I'm sorry?
Numbers for students,
Oh,
targeted number of students for the high school. I just saw some different numbers. So what numbers would you be looking at? I saw one that looked in the fours over the next 10 years? Like 4,000, 4,100, 4,200?
So I will admit to you that the information we have right now is not great. So if you look at the projections from the 2023 demographic study, the study shows you guys leveling out in your growth and kind of tabling off. I don't think anybody in this room thinks that's true. It says the same thing for elementary and middle school, which we'll talk about here in a little bit.
And I will note that even Jerry in his presentation said, this is not based off of necessarily any future growth. He said, this is what we know today with the permits that we have going, the average number of permits that we have going on. And I think he even said, this was 2 years ago, if you get over 1,000, you're gonna have to have me redo this because it's based on 7, and we've been over 1,000 for a couple of years, correct? A year on, so we know we're growing more quickly. So I think the one key takeaway is we need to get to October 1st, count day, and have Jerry ready to do a demographic study. We're 5 years removed from the pandemic and things. And then with the data the city will have, I think by the first of the year, I don't know how long the census will take, but we should have some really great data.
Yeah, and I think that 5,500 to 6,000 student number for the high school has come from basically comparing ourselves from a land area perspective to Carmel, of saying Carmel is of a similar size, of a similar demographic, and a similar build out. They're 5,300, 5,289 right now, have been as big as 5,500. Westfield, from a square mileage perspective, is a little bit bigger from a land area perspective, so that's where that 5,500 to 6,000 number is coming from. Once we have, again, the updated comprehensive plan and demographic study, we'll have a better idea. And I would posit that we would recommend that you guys are doing that demographic study every year, because otherwise we lose track of how things are happening. Because full transparency, like the demographic projections I'm using are 2.5 to 3 years old. So they may not be the greatest numbers for us to be basing all of our decisions on.
Jerry also said, in that, right, when we were talking about that projection, land size, he said, even if you had the same number of households, single-family households, as Carmel, you would not have as many students. Your index has never kept pace with their index of students per home. However, an updated demographic study would give us that new index to say, where are we? And where are they coming into our district? Are we seeing them in the elementary school? Are we seeing them in the middle? Like, that trend could be happening based on the price of home. But we will have, with the comp plan, a projected build out of single family homes. So then he will be able to put our current index to that and say, I project you will be X number at your high school when this is fully built out.
So is Carmel the largest single high school there is in the state?
It is.
I don't know, is anyone else in the state over 5,000? Ben Davis was there at one point.
We were just having we were looking this up as we were kind of doing final preps and trying to find who was next, and Ben Davis is kind of the next largest. They have some other components. They have a career center in other parts of their high school.
And they've also have an online academy.
Right.
They actually, on the books, have 3 high schools.
Right.
So I don't know if you add, I think if you add all their students up, they might still be trending really high, but they have reprogrammed how they do their high school.
Yeah.
I think Penn is not far behind Carmel. While they're at close to 4,000, I think, at Penn. And then Fisher's behind them.
So, and we're not necessarily limiting kind of our precedence to the state of Indiana, because you're starting to get into a league of your own. And when we talk to the principal at Carmel, he has, I think 6 or 10 districts that he's in around the country that they kind of have a communication group with, and they talk about issues that affect schools of their size. So there are others who are doing this. I think the most apples to apples example we found, which isn't perfect, but is in Allen, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas. They have 7,000 students in their one high school, and that's just grades 10 through 12. They have a separate ninth grade center with another like 1,500 to 2,000 kids in it. So they also have a $60 million football stadium, which is really cool, but neither here nor there. But that, from a program standpoint, that's one from a suburb, high-performing school, that's one that we've kind of earmarked that maybe we should go check out, walk through their high school and see what it's like. All right. Well, certainly we'll have more time for questions. I'll go ahead and kind of carry through into the middle school. As we look at capacity, this is basically considering fall of 2027. When we open Middle School West, we'll have the capacity for about 3,000 students. That's based off the teaming structure that the administration wants to implement in those. So we'll have 4 teams per grade level. And so that comes out to about 1,500. There is a little bit of flex space in both elementaries as they stand today. So we'll likely get maximum capacity of somewhere around 3,200 kids in there. That's kind of as we're building middle school number 3, we can flex a little bit as we think about in our timeline. With that in mind, as we look at the same demographic study, same projected enrollment, current capacity at 3,000, we're looking at probably 2033 before that middle school number 3 is going to be needed to come online. And that's based off our historical data, us projecting forward the growth at about 100 kids per year. The demographic study kind of levels off and says you don't need another middle school. So again, I don't think we in this room think that's fully accurate. And in theory, if we have 5,500 to 6,000 students at the high school, if you divide that out by class size, we should need a third at middle school at some point. As we look at middle school capital priorities, land procurement is going to be pretty critical, important as we try to find places for that building to land. Also, if we do assume that the current middle school becomes part of the high school, that becomes a very critical piece that's very time sensitive to figure out where does it go and how quickly can we get it done. Because really the pinch point is going to be at the high school first before we see it anywhere else. So we have plugged in some budget numbers there based off the current middle school West design. The theory right now is to replicate that design, which also addresses some of the equity concerns there are between current middle school and middle school West. You're giving everybody the same experiences on both sides of town, which is a nice kind of benefit of that. As we get the demographic study information updated, as we get the census information and the comprehensive plan information, we think this spring we need to come back through and update all of this and kind of have a reevaluation of those pieces, which will give us a better way to build out that long-term full district build-out timeline for the future. Last piece here is going to be on the elementary schools. So currently today, we have 5 elementary schools that are going to be programmed at 4 sections and 3 elementaries that will be 5 sections. This is based off of programming for fall of 2026. So when, I'm going to say it wrong, Midland Crossing and Shamrock Springs will open a little bit later, but when we bring the new elementary online and we redistrict those kids, this is kind of what we can expect. So all of your existing elementaries will run at about 650 students, optimal capacity. And that's because there are 4 sections. The new elementaries are new buildings that are opening, and the intermediate school, which will be converted to elementary number 8, will have the space that it can run 5 sections. So we're anticipating those capacities to be higher, so 742, 750, somewhere in that range. That gives us, from an optimal standpoint, about 5,400, 5,500 student capacity at the elementary level, K-5. Something to note, even once we take that optimal square footage or optimal use of the existing spaces, there are some remaining spaces in those buildings that would allow us to grow beyond that 54 or 5,500 number. So you can kind of see that white column just above the bottom, second to the bottom, rooms remaining. So even the existing elementaries have a little bit of space, which is good because you'll get bubble classes as they come through. We need to be able to flex a little bit. So 4-2 isn't unheard of. And then the new elementaries actually have 6 additional classrooms in those that we can use to help accommodate growth, depending on how it fluxes in and out. So that would give us a maximum building capacity of just over 6,300.
And just for context, I looked it up, we have currently, I'm not rolling forward, right? Enrolled for this year, grades K through 5, 4,829 students as of about 15 minutes ago. So, so that's, if you divided today's capacity by 8, that would be approximately 600 per school. Now, the thing that we need to know is both K and 1 are trending down. 1's probably our smallest, so we do have a bubble, but even kindergarten is approaching back to 8. It's 771 today, but by the start of school in a couple weeks, it could be at 800, and that's the one that Jerry, demographer, said would be our lowest. It's not. It was last year's kindergarten is the lowest. So even with birth rates down, we are seeing kindergarten growth. So, but there is a little bubble down because all our other schools are well into our other grade levels are well into the 800s. Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Another thing I'll just note here, and we may talk about again on a different sheet, is there are obviously some program differences now between the new elementaries and the existing, from collaborative workspaces to how, 4 sections versus 5, how does 5th grade fit into the existing buildings when they're kind of set up in wings and there's not a designated 5th grade wing. So there are some concerns about how that all is going to operate, and the intention in the last master plan was that at some point we will come back and renovate those buildings to meet that requirement, right? And so that's a timing piece that we're tracking that you'll see here in a minute. But first, as we think about elementary school number 9 and the timing of that, right now, I didn't update that number, so 5475, ignore my 5266, is, so 5,400, 5,500 kids, puts us about between 29, 2030, probably when we need to be opening that next elementary. Again, we do have a little bit of fluff as we have those additional classrooms at some of the other elementaries to help us with that growth, so we could potentially even maybe push it off another year or two. Again, as we get the updated demographics, updated comprehensive plan and those numbers, we'll be able to kind of fine tune that and make sure we're tracking it correctly. So what we're hoping and thinking right now is with the decline in K-1 enrollment and with the little bit of, and the current projected timeline for elementary school number 9 is that we may have time, if we have the financial ability, to go back and start those renovations at the existing elementaries and get them to be 5-section schools similar to the new elementary schools, which would also gain us a little bit of capacity as we do that.
The positive from that side is building a school is expensive, but also is operating a school. And so you want as few number of schools as you can have, as full as you can, because that's your operational efficiency. I like to say, right, like every time you open a building, you're going to have to put a principal in there and staff that are ancillary to the classroom teachers. And so ensuring not only do we have equitable space for our programming, but also ensuring that we're maximizing the right size and number for that financial efficiency for both our education and operation fund will be really critical. We haven't talked about that, Greg, as we talk about, we can start to talk about that, but that's one of the pieces with this first phase that we just need to get done. With this study, we can start right-sizing not only our staffing, but our space and our schools.
So does the timeline for the elementary number 9 need by 2028, it's currently not reflective of expanding our the 5 elementaries that only have 4 sections, if we were to expand all 5 of those to be 5-section schools, where does that push number 9 down on the timeline? Or is it factored in already?
That's a great question. We can run those numbers and see what how that impacts projected capacity.
I'm gonna do a rough estimate. Did you say the 5-section schools were 770?
742 versus 650.
Yeah, so 100, so an extra 500.
So
Run-
5 years?
Run it down, you're in the bad data now with the demographics,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
but it gives you approximately, I'm gonna say 400 to 500
Students.
Students?
Yeah. So, and some of that would also depend on, which we've talked about a little bit, implementation, right? Are we going to plan to do all of those renovations at the exact same time? Or are we gonna do an elementary and then 2 years later do an elementary and then 2 years later do an elementary? Because that'll impact how that capacity comes online. 580 students?
Yeah, so I think. Yeah, I think, so ultimately, it's a great question. We can answer that question.
Mhm.
As part of the plan, what we think we should do, not only from a space, but equity, programming. And then when we do that, our financial team can put numbers to it to say, is this feasible, right? Because I would suggest that doing it at one time is the best way to do it. Programming and educationally, because we're already gonna have deficiencies with our new schools compared to our old schools and functionality. And going back to what Alicia said about collaboration, that culture, it's the transition that started that we've built into all our schools since the high school edition is there, right?
Mhm.
And we've talked about it, so the sooner we can do that with our existing schools, the better those spaces will function for the type of cultures we're trying to create.
Yep. So recommendations and next steps. So one, we think we need to affirm current projects or portions of projects that need to move forward and ones that need to maybe be reevaluated or the scope needs to be revised and what that looks like. That's not necessarily a decision for us to make, but that's something that we just want to make sure we're making the right decisions, asking the right questions, and making the right investments. We're going to update enrollment projections, as we said. Once we get more information, we can come back and quickly plug in new data and spit out better, more informed kind of long-term projections. And then with the leadership team, we're going to help develop that long-term full district build-out from a timing and financial perspective of what that looks like. Beyond that, for the high school, we're recommending that we do need to complete the master plan. To do that, we're likely talking about some conceptual design, kind of very high level. But without getting into some of the details, there's really no way for us to completely figure it out. To Alicia's point earlier, we have looked at several different models of how that might work. And obviously, different models have different price tags associated with them. So there's some exploration there, and as many guardrails as we can put up out the gate will help us kind of tailor into the final solution quicker. But that's something that we think, and could be kind of exciting too, as you think about communicating this with your community of, if we are one high school, what does that mean? What does it look like? Well, we can maybe put something exciting from imagery out from a long-term plan perspective of what that might look like. Again, it's going to be very conceptual. It's a long, 10 to 15 years, but I think this is the decision that we've got to get right for your district in order to not regret it, 10, 15, 20, and in perpetuity, because once you've made these investments and decisions, this high school will be here forever, right? It's very important. Middle school land procurement, so I think getting a piece of land for the replacement middle school, the current middle school or middle school east as it may be termed, maybe north, south, wherever it may land. I think deciding where that goes and finding the piece of property of where it's gonna land is gonna be really, really critical. If we're thinking that middle school is gonna become part of the high school campus by 2030, at the most rapid timeline, I think we can do it. And then timing and land procurement for middle school number 3 and figuring out where that is and how that works. Elementary school land procurement is here again because we need to be sensitive to where the future elementaries are going to land. And obviously property is not going to get any cheaper, so the earlier we can get on that, the better. I do know there's been some conversations with the city and with developers on possibly getting some land as housing developments are going in, which would certainly help that process, and from a financial perspective especially. And then renovating the existing elementary schools, we feel based off the demographic information we have, there's time here, if the finances are available, that we could go ahead and start planning those renovations. We did have some early conversations in the last master plan that maybe it's better for them to move into these buildings with 5th grade and live it a little bit, so we make sure we're addressing the right things rather than kind of assuming we know what the pinch points are gonna be. So I think that's gonna be a balance as we figure out the timing of it to make sure we can get some live feedback before we jump right in. And then obviously making sure we're watching for elementary number 9 of when that's gonna take place. We know, just construction-wise, it's probably 18 to 20 months to get that built, and then we gotta back into the design schedule and all of those pieces. So making sure we're continually monitoring that. I think that is everything. John, if I've missed something that we've discussed, let me know.
No, I do, you mentioned, so I am now sitting on the steering committee for the comprehensive plan for the city, which our next meeting is in August. And there is a piece there where we're grateful to the city for the partnership, Mayor Willis, because we are going to try to plot general areas of where schools should be. So as we develop out, right, we can have conversations if we haven't found that we need land for a school somewhere in these areas based on the density of the homes and how they're building them out. And so they're not going to be specifically, this is where it will be, but in this general area. So the timing of this master plan is perfect for that, because if we say, okay, it's 12 elementaries for sure, okay, then we need more land, and we need to try to plot where those elementaries should go, and do that sooner rather than later. And then same with the middle schools. Is this the question or comment time?
Yes, please. I have no more slides.
So I do think if we are happy, or Brent's happy and his team to answer any questions, I do know Alicia probably describes it best. The current project that we were doing at the high school started from a very different perspective. I would call it a very program-based conversation, right? Everything was built around, this is kind of the last for this school. From a program, let's get the program right. Then you came and looked like from a different, it actually started, I believe, when we started saying, what if we relocated the middle school and we stayed with one high school? We immediately said, well, you have to master plan both. And actually, the team working on that said, we need to master plan this, because we don't even know how much water, where's the water gonna go? And why would we do that every time you add on? Why wouldn't we address that initially, right? And and now if you're saying we may relocate things, right? The whole mindset has shifted. And so I think we all need a little bit of time to process that, we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
So that's first that I would say. However, Brent, and then I do want you to introduce the team here that's doing this work for us, just so everyone's reminded and we can thank them.
Sure. Boy, almost make you guys do this yourselves. Fred Prezo and Sammy Sullivan, and back here from Context Design. So they're our land planners and site designers. Anything athletics, circulation, landscape, playgrounds, all of those things. They are usually our partner in that, and their insights are immensely helpful as we look at campus master planning from those perspectives. From CSO, Stephanie Lone, she is our educational planner. Nick Wissing, one of our project managers. Jeff Olson and Jim Funk are two of our owners who are here this evening. And then from Myron Ajum, Jonathan, and Matt, sorry, who are construction manager partners who have posed some good, interesting questions and kind of come at things from a different perspective than designers usually do. So it's always nice to have them at the table. And then you guys know Brian Kelly, right? He's been a good voice to have along the road to make sure we're thinking practically and long-term and about the right things, so.
Thank you very much. It's a lot to take in, for sure.
All right, so I think we'll, again, thanks Brent, thanks. We have two more things we want to talk about. Number one is I want to turn it over to Dr. Hoover. This is just a quick update. Last week we got some feedback on some academic performance in the state around SAT and iLearn. And so just a high level, we will do, this probably could take up a full work session at some point. We haven't had a chance to dig in, do a deep dive, but we do think the information's out. Bill sent a summary, and so and these are areas I just want to know. Thanks, guys.
We spent 2 hours, you guys 55 minutes. I'm just kidding, you guys gotta get out of here. Thank you guys all.
Thank you.
The work, and with Alicia sitting here, I don't want to, like, where we started the evening, and I hope everyone, knows that, like, I revere teachers, the team here, we know that, and the work they do today, just with the pressure, not only for academic performance, but they put on themselves. It's a grind day in and day out. We know that, we respect that, and we honor that, and we want to support them. And so we have some success here that they've been working on just in my short time here. And when we saw it last week, we thought we need to do a high-level celebration of that. So, Dr. Hoover.
So, Board of Trustees, thank you for this time. I just wanted to very quickly, I will tell you in full transparency, Carmen Carnes, our Director of Assessment and Data, and I had a chance, she gets that information right away, and of course, when that comes in, it's kind of like our Christmas. We like for to see all that data coming through, and she started very quickly. You're able to look at it kind of at a high level, and then it takes a lot more time to really disaggregate and go in, but we looked at it from a high level, and wanted immediately, kind of about a couple hours later, shared some of it with Dr. Atha, just because it's a celebration of what our teachers do. We obviously know that it's a data point. It's not the only thing that matters, but it is something that does matter, and so we want to make sure that we celebrate those things when they come out, and these were just a couple of high-level ones. He's correct that we will spend a lot more time once we have more information, but this was just some general information. Just a quick reminder, we're going to talk just quickly about SAT and then the iLearn, because those are the ones that kind of came out. Just a reminder, we do this, junior year, it's in October. There's two main parts, the evidence-based reading and the writing part, and then the math as well. And then the student results come through like a cut score, and it gives us a benchmark level, and there's 3 different areas. So you can see that, at math, we had about 51% at benchmark. The two things we really like to look at is increases from one year to the next, right? We're always talking, excuse me, I'm over the mic. We're always talking about growth. And that's one of the things we're always, you know, as Dr. Atha shared earlier, we're always trying to hire great people and then make them better, right? That's one of our key tenets and our model. So you can see that, you know, we had a 3.6% increase from last year in math, a 4.4% increase in English and writing. You know, unofficially, now I will tell you, when we look at it whole scale, we like to look at, it shows all of the public and private schools all in one. Schools like ours have literally hundreds and thousands of kids that are taking the test versus some others that there may only be a very small, you know, even less than 100 students. And so we sometimes will remove some of those schools, but ultimately we leave all the public schools in the mix. And so unofficially, you know, our Westville students are at sixth in state compared to schools like us, and seventh in English and writing, and that's in the state of Indiana. Unofficially, if you look at both, about 50% at benchmark, once again, a 4% increase, and that puts us unofficially, at about 6th in the state compared to schools like us. So, first of all, increases in all those areas. I think that's, you know, once again, whenever you can make increases in those areas, it's a positive thing. One of the areas, and we'd have to kind of really get into the quantitative pieces of this from a statistical standpoint, but when you get to a high enough level, getting to that next percentage, you know, going from 50 to 60 in some areas is much easier than going from 78 to 80, all right? And just because you get to a point of where the number of students that are passing those tests is, you know, it gets very hard to then get past that upper echelon, like we talked about earlier. So I just wanted to kind of share that we are, you know, when you're talking top 10 in the state, really top 5 in some of these cases, I mean, we're talking pretty high level increases and also achievement by our students. And like I said, once again, just one, this is the SAT, obviously a pretty big one, right, for our, you know, college admissions and so forth. But we did want to just kind of highlight this, and more importantly, you know, and I'm glad Alicia's here just to celebrate the work that our teachers and our students and our families are putting into this, because this was one area that we've constantly, although we had many great things, this was one of those that was, I wouldn't say lagging behind, but that we wanted to see more increases as we moved forward. So this was just the first one. You guys have all heard about iLearn. Once again, this is our 3rd through 8th, our state mandated assessment. We look at this in language arts, math, science, and social studies. Once again, there's cut scores, proficiencies, and so forth. We do this every year. We do this, you know, in late April, early May, and we look at this across, you know, multiple areas. When the scores come in, they come in several ways. One, by district. So they take all of our 3rd through 8 and kind of lump them all together, compare them against other districts in the state. Then you can disaggregate it by grade level, and then you can actually look at it by school. So there's lots of ways that we can look at it. For today's purposes, we just wanted to look at it kind of across the district. So a couple of things. You will see a couple areas that we actually, and there's going to be a couple of slides in here that might make you kind of do a double take, and I want to explain sort of that best I can. We had 65.7 at or above proficiency. It was actually just a slight decrease, a 0.3% decrease from previous year, had us at unofficially about 14th compared to the other like schools in the state in math. Language arts, we had just the same thing, about a 0.3% decrease from last school year, but actually had us at about unofficially 11th. When you take those two combined, however, which looks at kids that passed both math and language arts, we're at 52.8, so a little bit of a decrease, but actually has us at 10th in the state compared to like districts. By no means will we ever make alibis in this district. We never look for excuses. But if I were going to go down that road, which I'm not, we would look at things like, sometimes there's a thing called an implementation dip when you look at new resources or new procedures to a resource that we're using. As all of you well know, in the last 2 years, we've done both, with Reveal being added to K through 8 and then our CKLA adoption last year. By no means is that an explanation for this, good or bad. I'm just simply saying most districts historically, when they do adopt a new resource, there's research on what's called an implementation dip. I was actually very thrilled with how we have, I would say, sustained and maintained our levels throughout this part. Obviously, our next step is to continue to trend upward in both of these areas. Obviously, you know, statistically, when we look at these things, we are looking at students. We want to look at data from a longitudinal standpoint of cohort groups from where they're at in 3rd grade and then how they progress throughout the year. One of the trickier parts about doing that in a growing district is our cohorts are never the same because 1, they're always growing, and 2, they're always different kids. But we can still look at that for trend data as we're going forward. Possibly more of a celebration was when you look at individual schools and you look at increases. Anything, you know, over 3 to 4% is a pretty significant gain from one year to the next. And you can actually see that in math, you know, 3 of our schools made pretty substantial increases in math, which would be, you know, our Reveal program, our Reveal resource. Language arts, which would be our CKLA resource and StudySync. You can see that our 5th and 6th grade, as well as our 4th, 3rd, and then again 4th at various schools, had some pretty significant increases. So definitely some positives. I'm sure you can surmise when we do this, we don't look at our schools, and compare them 1 through 6. That's not what this test data is used for. We look at this across the district and how we can help each other. So there's always going to be some highlights and some areas of need in some areas. We wanted to obviously today focus more on the celebrations, but I want you to know we will also be looking, and a lot of the information we shared this at our leadership summit will be kind of that prelude of looking at that. So speaking as a former building principal, that was one of my favorite things to do, was to get our guiding coalition together and say, all right guys, here's some things we did wonderful. Now let's take a look at some things that we can continue to improve on. That's what they're going to be doing on Thursday, along with their engagement study. So anyhow, this was some great data. And then we can also share with you just a couple of areas that I really wanted to point out. Oak Trace Elementary School was in the top 10 schools of all schools in Indiana, which I thought was pretty remarkable. We also had one of our schools, Monon Trail, despite having over 800 and some students, despite having those challenges of continued growth, made some substantial gains in both math and language arts. So we were really, really excited about that. All of our schools continue to make, you know, progress, but we want to make sure that we're looking at that year-to-year growth. So we will have a much more detailed, disaggregated presentation for you here probably in the next month or two that, you know, and we'll obviously talk to you before then to know exactly what you want us. And like I said, Carmen Carnes will be our leader on that, but I just wanted to present some highlights, some celebrations to you, and then offer some chance for some questions before we move on.
I did have a question to the previous slide. The top 2 say at or above proficiency versus at benchmark, and the SAT scores were at benchmark. Can you just describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so if you go back, some of it's terminology
Okay.
more than it is anything. So if you look at SAT, we're talking more benchmark, and when we get to I learned they talk more about proficiency. So
Gotcha.
it's more just the terminology of the cut score and what they've deemed as meeting the so proficiency is going to be based more on did they meet enough standards at that grade level to be considered proficient at that grade. And whereas SAT, they're really looking at more of a cut score that they have to hit or a benchmark that has to be met. So that's really I don't want to say it's semantics, but it somewhat is.
Okay,
And that's the nature of the 2 different assessments.
thank you.
And then I think when you combine the 2, right?
Correct.
Like you, there's a little bit different there.
There is, right.
So.
One of the other things I did want to add that is different in years past, most schools traditionally, language arts and math is kind of really where they've spent most of their time, and that's been the focus from the state. The state has talked about bringing back science and social studies as more of an impact on the overall scores of schools. We did look at those scores as well. We actually did very well. We were 4th or 5th in the state in both science and social studies, so we're actually doing really well. I will tell you, one of the nice parts about our math and reading program is they both lend themselves very well to science and social studies due to the nature of their, and we can get into this more later, but most of the research has shown that science and social studies tests are also a test of reading, not as much of content of those areas. And so although there is some, it's also as much of a test on math and reading as it is necessarily the content of science and social studies. So it's just something we'll need to be careful that we don't jump into and misinterpret scores. But
We should add that to our celebration list then.
yes,
Because when Bill sent the entire data set and it broke it down by math, reading, science, and social studies, officially, we ranked in like, I think it was the 3rd in the state and the 4th in the state in those 2 content areas.
we did.
Compared to, and I appreciate, because when you look through the bigger list and you're seeing these very small schools that are ranking above us, it's nice to know where we rank compared to public schools of our
Sure.
apples to apples.
And in all fairness, we left those on because we didn't feel it was appropriate to remove schools. The only ones we did remove were non-public schools. And most of that because due to the very, very low numbers, it can almost somewhat skew the overall data. Not that good things aren't going on in those places as well, but just because of the comparisons to a school that has multiple elementaries and so forth. Are there any other questions, though?
We had some elementaries that were like, as you mentioned earlier, really high.
We did.
In the state, so that's really great news. And I think all of them are probably comfortably in the top half, which is awesome. And so then the hard part is how do you get, our 2 through 6 to be the same level as our number 1 without lowering our number 1. I don't know the answer to that. But anyway, that seems like that's kind of the goal, is
Well,
to bring everybody up and
sure.
disseminate those skills and abilities. I don't know how you do that, but
This will be something that we'll absolutely want to address more in our, I will tell you, kind of going back to Dr. Kaiser's vertical and horizontal articulation, some of the work that we've been doing with alignment and some of our curriculum groups and having schools all work together as they plan is really a huge first step. I'll just give you an example just so you guys kind of know, like Monon Trail had some great numbers in 3rd grade math this year. They were, highest I think we had in a long time. We had almost every school reaching out, meeting with them, their instructional coaches getting together, learning from each other. What are you guys doing this year? Because it's one of those things. So we're really trying to get away from that competing with each other and instead learning from each other. Because there's always, that's why we love our teachers. They're always trying new things and we are, more importantly, supporting each other in this process as we are competing against, now ultimately our goal is to get all 8 of our elementaries next year in that upper echelon, and that's what we're improving towards. So, and that will be something in our redistricting and rebalancing that we will obviously keep in mind as we try to create equity amongst our schools.
I think that's a key piece that as we transition, it'll happen the second half of this school year. Folks will know, our teachers will know, and our families will know where they're going to go to elementary school. And we haven't made a change. I think it's 2009, is that the last time we rebalanced our district attendance at Lyons? Yeah. So we are probably going to move more families and students than ever before, probably than anyone, just because where the schools are located, where, and just trying to, with Westfield Elementary. So this work and this celebration, the hope is, right, even no matter where you land, in that you can hit the ground kind of running and have those supports in place that you need, whether it's the high quality research-based resource
Sure.
or a collaborative team, you can count on those things.
Right, what I think makes me most excited is just that, is we're gonna be transitioning, but we're gonna have students that are now, no matter which school they went to and no matter which grade they're in, including fifth grade coming down, who will be going into their third year of this, and of second year of their resource of CKLA, and there will be very few differences. Now, we still provide, like we talked about earlier, we want our teachers to have some of that loose components of what they're doing as far as how they're teaching students, but as far as the what and then how we're assessing them, we do want some parameters and guardrails on that, so that way we can then provide data and information on is what we're doing, meeting the students' needs, and then it's just a continuous cycle. So I'm very excited about the fact that when we transition, especially from our intermediates coming down, the intermediate school has done a phenomenal job preparing their teachers to be ready to teach fifth grade at the elementary using that high-level resource, starting in '26.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just reiterate, thank you again. It's exciting to read those results. I feel like those, again, I'm an amateur reading those results, but it does inspire me. It makes me feel like all the work we do to talk about creating space and even serving our staff, it's all worth it because we're getting this tremendous results compared to the rest of the state. It just puts us in a tremendous position for the future of our kids. So, thanks.
The last agenda item we had to discuss was school names, specifically our middle school. I have to tell you, I don't know if you caught it in Brent's presentation, but when we started talking about relocating the current middle school, well, he stopped calling that middle school East because he was confusing himself. So it was middle school and middle school West. And then he, as he started talking about building out, we understand that it was the physical location, but there is a chance, for example, that West might have to someday serve the majority of the south of our district, right? And so the thought process that has gone into the master plan is should we have a similar? Now, what I would say to you, where we are, where this started was in order to log Westfield Middle School West, which is currently what we have referenced, with the DOE, I need a motion we need a motion, Ryan will do this in the future, we need a motion from the board for the official name and the grade level configuration. So then when I started to say we were going to do that, I asked Stacy, are we sure everybody's we're okay with this? I don't want to have that discussion at a regular board meeting. I want to have it at a work session and then take it to a regular board meeting. That's how it works, right? And so that's kind of why I posed the question, this is the time to talk about it if we're going to talk about it. Now, I will say to you, from a common sense standpoint, I was a part of how we got to where we are, and it makes sense to me because there were no good names or great names that rose to the top. That weren't taken, right? We talked about Town Road, but there's a town. So ultimately, what we said was, and I believe Dr. Kaiser said, let's refer to them as East and West. What I have learned since, did you know that we are not Washington Township? We are officially Westfield Washington Township. So we are not, so at times when people have said we are Washington Township I think it was in the 50s, there were so many Washington Townships, they officially changed our name to Westfield Washington. So the idea is, there was some talk about Washington Middle School, really doesn't fit because we're not Washington Township, we're Westfield Washington Township. And so, again, you could argue, I think that argument is out there.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not and we talked about Carmel having Carmel Middle School, Clay Middle School,
Creekside. I mean, there's a
Creekside.
creek
And,
next to
and
that
we
new
did,
middle school.
we did do some work. Creekside was named by the community. We don't know the other two, but, several
Clay's, Clay
districts did it.
Township.
I would say
Yeah.
though, if we were to do something like that, like put a team together or however, like you have to live with the result that you get.
Correct.
And so we could put guardrails on it. The piece I think we're looking for is, and it doesn't need to be answered tonight, the school won't be open. We can file it next year. I do think as we get to the build out, because it won't officially open till 27, so maybe this conversation needs to be tabled with the master plan that we just heard is, though, if we want to go through a process, or stick with where we were is kind of the question. If we do, then we can roll that into some part. We would want it to be collaborative. We want, in my mind, it would be built around how Dr. Hoover has done some of the work for adoption. We'd want to build consensus, right? It wouldn't just be, hey, there would need to be some, I guess, study of who we are as Westfield and why these names are something that should be considered, if we go that way. That would be my only piece on that. If we want to stay somewhat where we are, I think we're okay with that. In talking with the middle school administration, they're open to either. I think the key piece is no one, the name is not like yay, love, but it's not, like people would say, it's also common sense and they can live with it. So.
Right. And just for everybody that's out there in the web, there's no decision being made on any school names or anything else.
No, it's just like, should we have everything that we have in our documentation, we have referred to it as Westfield Middle School West. And so, as I worked with the Department of Ed, they said, you need official board action. So before we took that official board action, this is our opportunity to have this conversation.
If memory serves me, didn't we have a poll of names that we worked with?
That was for the elementary.
Was it the elementary? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, there's like 6 or 7 names
yeah,
there.
they did some work at the elementary school. There are several districts in our conference that use directions, is what I'm going to say. And then there are a couple that do not. I think it's really difficult, maybe to, Southeastern, because they have 2 high schools, is a little bit different. But everybody else that has 1 high school uses their same,
Directions.
uses their name, like Shamrocks, because they feed into 1. And Doug Luce did a lot of work around that, and that he recommended that, if you remember that piece. If
Keep
we
the
only have
mascot.
1 eyes, keep everybody the Shamrocks.
Right.
Keep the color scheme the same, so when people buy Spirit Wear, we're 1 community. That was, I think people were loud and clear in that. What wasn't was, it was kind of, Knowlesville uses east and west. They have a firm division in the White River. Brownsburg uses east and west. Avon uses, I think they have north, south, and west now. They have a 3rd. Zionsville is the unique one. They have Zionsville Middle and Zionsville Middle West. So the original kept its name and identity, and then West, but they're both the Eagles. Doug told me they did that so they didn't have to order new uniforms. Yeah, Doug feels very passionately, because West is the new, that right now, and the current was, he wanted to call it East and buy new uniforms, because just the equity piece, right? And he doesn't like how Zionsville necessarily, or he just said his vision would be to do it differently. But he also said at this point, it's not like he's leading athletics, school names are not his responsibility.
I do think it would be beneficial to table the conversation until we see the city plan and kind of know and understand, could we be looking at a middle school north and south versus, or, you know, where will our
Right.
district fit in the city's plan? And that might help us better guide where we want this conversation to go. But I'm not opposed to at least having a dialogue about a different name, but, you know.
The other thing that could happen, because we are a year delayed, is after we get rebalancing done, you will be able to identify a group of students and family, if you wanted to do that, right?
Right.
We have some time to do that because of the three. There is, Brent's funny, right? There are signage components built in. So he said, you know, if you're using a lot more letters in the name than we currently have built in, there'd be some cost. He said if you keep the name, amount of letters the same, it's minimal.
Right.
Like, we're still
Yeah.
early enough that the letters and the signage aren't.
Will fit,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not a significant cost in the change. But they have built in some places west. And that, I think that was the one last piece. We were doing the turf, and they actually, I saw one, this is, I know it, but what you see and when you're trying to do it, so you're trying to brand the school, and so on both sidelines,
It said
they had
west.
west. And one was west, and one was east, right? But it said what, and like we caught it, but they were trying to brand it. And so then that's when we said, you know, we don't need west on everything, right? We can just make it Westfield or Shamrocks or Rocks. So that was the piece that, when we said, okay, let's, another thing about, okay, let's make sure we get this right. And I'm not saying what we have is wrong by any means. It's just kind of where we are in this process.
And if you haven't seen the new football field, it's shaping up pretty nice.
I think it did
The
have.
new
things
turf,
added.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
that's-
coming along, yeah.
We'll get another picture out. I know Ashley's following that. Well, let's table it then, and then we can call it a night.
Sounds good. End of the work session. And again, work sessions are not made to make any decisions or any votes or anything else. It's just discussions. Thank you and good night.